So we're on Daf Tet Amud Aleph and Daf Tet Amud Bet. My goal tonight is to review the Gemara as a stepping stone towards learning Tosafot, several limudim in Tosafot that will hopefully enrich our understanding not only of the Gemara on the blot, but also the concept of Tosafet Shvi'it, Tosafet Shabbat, Tosafet Yom Tov, Tosafet Yom Kippurim. Tosafet just means to add some time, being Mosif Michol HaKodesh, that we're transforming some part of the profane time into sacred time. That's basically what's happening. And what we'll see tonight, we're reviewing it to begin with, because without the what I call the activation energy required for the reaction, that's not going to work, because you have to have it sort of in your active memory in order to be able to get to the Tosafot, because it's going to get a little bit complicated. As part of this, we're going to end up seeing a parallel sugya to our sugya as relates to the issue of Shvi'it, of Shemitah, from Masechet Moed Katan. And it's going to be related, and we'll need it for Tosafot, as is the way of the Bali Tosafot, of course. Their analysis is a dialectical analysis. They have a Gemara here. It says whatever it says, but isn't there another Gemara elsewhere that says something else that seems to contradict what we're reading here? So that's the thesis, this antithesis, and the synthesis. They try to reconcile the two Gemaras, and with an eye towards getting to whatever the halacha is meant to be. So on Daf Tet Amud Aleph, we started learning about the idea of being Mosif Michol HaKodesh. And the Gemara points out already on line 4, Daf Tet Amud Aleph. I'm kind of speeding through it because we already did the spade work. We looked up the Psukim. We saw what it's about. Hopefully people who weren't able to be here last week looked at the Psukim. The Mosifim Michol HaKodesh Minalan. What is the source for being Mosif Michol HaKodesh? The Tanya, we learn in a pasuk from Parshat Kitisa, Becharish uvakatzir tishbot. And to remind you, the beginning of that pasuk sure sounded like it was talking about the Shabbos of the week, not the Shabbos of the Shavua of every 7 years, since it starts Sheshet Yamim Ta'avod Uvayom HaShvi Tishbot. It actually says the word Yom. 6 days you shall work, the 7th day you shall rest or cease, have a cessation of work. And then it says Becharish uvakatzir tishbot, from plowing and reaping you shall cease. And the question is, why single out these two malachas? And that's the machloket between Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva. I said it backwards. Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yishmael. And that's what we have here on line 6, right? So line 5, I meant to say, sorry. Rabbi Akiva, last two letters there, Reish Ayin. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Eino tzarich lomar chayish v'katzer shel shvit, shari kvar ne'amar sadchalo tizra v'gomer. It didn't have to tell us that on the time period of Shemitah, one is not allowed to plant or to do agricultural things, because it said so where? In Parshat Bahar, the headquarters of all of the mitzvah of Shemitah. It's mentioned elsewhere in the Torah, Parshat Mishpatim, Parshat Kitisa, and then in Parshat Bahar, and so on. But its headquarters certainly is in Bahar. So it already taught us that in the headquarters location. So why did it in Parshat Kitisa tell us Bacharish uvakatzir tishbot elacharish shel erev shvit anichnas l'shvit v'katzir shel shvit ayotzi l'motzei shvit? It's for Tosafet to tell you that the plowing prior to Shemitah is also prohibited within a certain time frame prior to the onset of that 7th year, and the act of reaping anything that already came to a third of its yield prior to, in other words, is a third grown prior, not of the yield, but a third grown. Prior to the end of Shemitah is still part of the Shemitah year, and you're not allowed to harvest. It has the same dinim of Shemitah, even though the other 2/3 are going to grow in the 8th year. Rabbi Yishmael disagrees. He says, I look at that pasuk, the beginning of the pasuk, the ratio of the pasuk is about Shabbos, the sefer of the pasuk is about Shabbos. Now I'll have to understand why those two malachas taken out, but Rabbi Yishmael, Omer, Macharish Rishut, Af Ketzir Rishut. The point here was, as plowing is generally a volitional act, so too the act of reaping is a volitional act, and both of those are prohibited. Why is it being mentioned here? Yatsa Katsir HaOmer Shehu Mitzvah. Charish is probably the first of the activities you do in terms of agriculture in a field, and the last one in the field, connected to the field itself, is kotzer. There are activities after kotzer to be sure that you're dealing with in terms of that which you've harvested. And again, that machloket from Klal Gadol is the first act of agriculture, choresh or zoreya, discussion about whether the plowing happens and then the seeding, or first the seeding and then the plowing in order to mix it into the furrows. Whatever the case, the point is, why did the Torah go out of its way to teach us something we already know about Shabbos, Charisha and Kitzira, to tell us that there is going to be an exceptional case? And what's that? That's the Kitzir HaOmer. If it's a Friday night that happens to be Mocharat HaShabbat, so that's when they're going to reap the harvest. It's Shabbos, but you're not allowed to reap the harvest before. You can't reap the harvest on the 15th. That's Yom Tov. Can't reap it on the 14th. You're not allowed to do it until the 16th. It says so in the Torah. On the 16th is when you do the reaping of the harvest of the barley that you're going to use for the Korban HaOmer on the daytime of the 16th. What if that's a Friday night? So that you could do. Yatsa Katsir HaOmer Shu Mitzvah. And since that's obligatory, it's not subject to the prohibition that you would otherwise have of doing volitional acts of reaping. So the Gemara says, okay, so we understand for Shemitah that there's a notion of Tosafot Shvi'it, adding to it from Rabbi Akiva's view. But Rabbi Yishmael, where do you get it from? Rabbi Yishmael, Mosifim Echol HaKodesh Minala. Where do you get it from? Nafkalei, he learns it Midatanya because the fact that it teaches us in the Psukim in Parshat Emor, V'initim and Nafshotechem B'tish'ah. It's again, that's a bit of a run-on sentence. It's not, it's actually V'initim and Nafshotechem B'tish'ah L'chodesh Me'erev Ad-Erev. Yachol B'tisha, maybe it means you have to fast on the 9th. Talmud Lomar Ba'erev. You have to do it in the evening. So, ba'erev yachol mishatach. Maybe ba'erev means at night. After all, ba'erev tochlu matzot. In another context, it has to be dark outside to eat the matzah. So maybe ba'erev yachol mishatach has to be dark outside, and that's when you start fasting. Talmud lomar b'tish'ah. You're going to start fasting on the 9th. Okay, so how does that work out? The Gemara explains. Matchil mitanem ba'od yom. You begin fasting while it's still daytime. Melamed shemosifin mechol al hakodesh. Right? We extract from the chol, from the time that is profane, and we put it upon the time of Kodesh, i.e., we bring in Yom Kippurim, the fast of Yom Kippurim, the Isurim of Yom Kippurim earlier than actual sunset. And the Gemara says, okay, Ein li'el b'knisato. I learned that from that says B'tisha l'chodesh ba'erev. So I got, okay, you showed me that it tells me on the way into the holiday. But what about on the way out? How do you know that on the way out you also have to add a little bit? It doesn't end. How do you know it doesn't end? At sunset or something. You have to go farther. So Talmud Lomar me'erev ad erev. The Torah actually says me'erev ad erev. We saw the Pesukim last time. Ein li'el Yom Kippurim. So that just tells me about Yom Kippur. So Shabbatot minayin. Where do you learn Shabbos from? Talmud Lomar tishbetu. Because it says in the pasuk, the next word is tishbetu. So yamim tovim minayin. How do you know Yom Tov is going to be the same thing? Talmud lomar shabbatchem. It actually says in the pasuk. That's what it says, right? Shabbat shabbaton hu lachem v'initem et nafshotechem b'tisha lachodesh ba'erev me'erev ad erev tishbetu shabbatchem. Okay, you with me? Everybody with me? It's not in this pasuk.
No, it's.
That's not being analyzed right now. I mean, there's another pasuk elsewhere, but it's not referring to Tosafot.
Just trying to reconcile this pasuk with where we say Shaptotai Tishmolu. I believe, I may be wrong, that refers to Shabbos. It does not include Chagim. And why is there a distinction?
So that's a good sugya. That's not exactly our sugya. So I don't want to take us on that off ramp. But right now, just analyzing these words in this pasuk as the source for Rabbi Akiva explaining to us why it's Tosafot. But Shabtotai Tishmoru, I don't know that it pertains to the Tosafot question per se.
Probably doesn't, but it would strike me that should not necessarily be an answer here, because by saying Shabtotechem would include
Tishbetu Shabbatchem.
I'm sorry, Tishbetu Shabbatchem.
Are you saying why is Shabbatchem Yamim Tovim?
Yes.
Rabbi Akiva doesn't tell us why. He seems to just have this like drasha. Now, where did he get it from? That's going to be part of our discussion tonight. Because if you look in, it says it's not Shabtotechem, but Shabbatchem. Tishbetu Shabbatchem. Shabbat Shabbaton Hu Lachem. Tishbetu Shabbatchem. So it repeated Tishbetu and Shabbatchem. Why didn't you learn it from Shabbat Shabbaton? So we're going to come back to those two words later also. But for now, that's just what the Gemara is giving us. Is Rabbi Akiva figured it out from these words. You're right. There are a bunch of different Mekorot there as well. Pardon? This is Rabbi Yishmael. Sorry. I'm sorry. Sorry. Rabbi Akiva learns it all from the pasuk having to do with Shvi'it. And for Rabbi Akiva, it seems that the notion of Tosafot for everything, the headquarters from which it derives, is Shemitah. For Rabbi Yishmael, the headquarters seems to be Yom Kippur. We talked about this last time. That for Rabbi Akiva, it's sourced in the location. I mean, it's also time, but it's the time of the mitzvah associated with Eretz Yisrael. For Rabbi Yishmael, the headquarters is, to put it philosophically, a sanctuary in time. Shabbat, Shabbaton, Yom Kippurim, and all Tosafot is learned. It seems, for Zman at least, is learned from there. Yeah, sounds that way. So the Gemara says, "Haketzad." How do we know this to be the case? So anytime we have a notion of shvut, we're mosif, we add from chol al hakodesh, meaning where else has not been mentioned by Rabbi Yishmael. He derived Yom Kippur, he derived Shabbos, he derived Yom Tov. What's missing? Shemitah. But Shemitah is also Shabbat la Hashem. Since Shvut is mentioned with regard to Shemitah, as it is for Shabbat, as it is for Yom Tov, as it is for Yom Kippurim, ergo, the concept of Tosafot obtains there as well. That's the position of Rabbi Yishmael. So again, Rabbi Akiva, it's learned from a pasuk that Rabbi Akiva understands to be referring to Shemitah, and it teaches us about Tosafot. And then Tosafot Michol HaKodesh, we don't necessarily know yet from Rabbi Akiva. So where's Rabbi Akiva learn the notion of Tosafot for time? Doesn't seem to say. In general, Shabbos, Yom Tov, Yom Kippurim, right? So just for consideration. But for Rabbi Yishmael, we got it. It's derived from the Psukim. Hi, welcome. From the Psukim related to Yom Kippurim. And everything derives from there, including Shemitah. So the Gemara now turns its attention to Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva, Hi v'initim and afshotechem b'tish'ah. My avidlay. What are you, Rabbi Akiva, going to do with that pasuk in Parshat Va'etchanan, Parshat Emor, sorry, where that, I was thinking of something else. In Parshat Va'etchanan, where it seems pretty obvious that you have to derive something from it. Your colleague Rabbi Yishmael derived a lot of it. Tosafot Yom Kippurim, Tosafot Shabbat, Tosafot Yom Tov. What are you going to do with that pasuk? So he says, I need it for that which Chia bar Rav from Difti taught. You should afflict yourself on the 9th. We're supposed to fast on the 9th. Don't we fast on the 10th of Tishrei? Rather, it comes to teach you, if you eat and drink on the 9th, Ma'alel b'katuv, Hi'ilu, Hitaneh, Chi, Ba'asiri. Yeah? It's as if you fasted 2 days in a row. Yeah? You're not asked to, but you're asked to eat one day and fast the next day, and it's like you fasted 2 days in a row. Okay? The right kavanas, right. Well, I said the Vilna Gaon had a candy in his mouth the whole day, Erev Yom Kippur. For that reason, because how much can you eat? Okay,
so that's not Tosefus, right? According to this, that's not Tosefus.
No. That's a special, right? It's a special limud about the fact that it's mentioning the 9th altogether.
Yeah.
To tell you that on the 9th, it's a mirror to the 10th, and whereas on the 10th, you're going to fast, on the 9th, you're going to eat.
You eat. Okay.
Yeah. And it may actually, by the by, according to Rabbi Akiva, maybe a biblical obligation to eat. He derived it from Sukkim. It's not impossible, but that it's not. But yeah. So okay. Just look at a few of the Rashis again, because it has to be solid before we go into the world of Tosafot, lest we become ensnared and lose ourselves there. So look with me on in Rashi, Tet Amud Aleph. Okay. So Ein Sarich Lomar Charish V'Katzer Shel Shvi'it. 1, 2, 3, 4 lines down in the narrow lines of Rashi. Da Kor Rafa Gav the Reish Dikra B'Shabbat Kai. Dichtiv Sheish Yamim Tavod Sefer Ashvit Kai. Even though against your rule, you have to say Rashi is explaining Rabbi Kiva's view. You must say that the latter part of the pasuk is really just regard to Shemitah, not regard to Shabbos. Even though the first half of the pasuk certainly is about Shabbos. Dei Ashabat Chatzirish V'Katzir Hu Da'aser Sham Malachat Misharu. What are you pointing out? Plowing and reaping. Are all the malachas permissible on Shabbos? No, of course not. Rhetorical question. So Rabbi Kiva says the second half of this pasuk, even though the beginning of it was about the Shabbos that comes around every 7 days, it can't be that Shemitah is also about that. The second half is also about that. It must be about Shemitah. Can't be about the Shabbos of the week. Charish shel erev shvit shliachos. Rather, he thinks it has to do with erev shvit. Charish shel erev shvit tosafot shvit. Right? Shliachos sadeh ilan erev shvit. Harish shioil lishvit, right? He shouldn't plow his field, which is a field with trees, on erev shvit. Any kind of plowing that will actually be helpful towards growth during shvi'it. Uktsir shel shvi'it kigon tvua shevia shlish b'shvi'it. That's on the back end, on the way out of a shemitah. The tvua that already was up to a third on Shvi'it started, on the 8th year, you still consider it like the 7th year, i.e. with all its attendant restrictions, because it was a third grown before the end of the year. Rabbi Yishmael Macharish Reshut, Lo Dibera Katuv El Inyan Shabbat. The Torah in this pasuk is only talking about the regular Shabbos. Kirichtiv Be Uvayom HaShvi'it Tishbot, Becharish V'Katzir Tishbot. It actually says, on the 7th day you shall rest, and here's what you should do to rest. Don't do Charisha, don't do Katsira. So what is it coming to teach you? Because it's not going to teach you 2 out of the 39 malachas for your health, since you already know the 39 malachas, because that's already a derivation that we have of the lamitet malachot. So macharish ein lecha charish shel mitzvah. Just as charish, you don't have any kind of plowing of mitzvah. Afilu lizroa letzorach omer ushtei alechem. Even planting for the sake of omer and shtei alechem. You could have argued, well, maybe the planting should be permissible because after all, it's for a dvar mitzvah. But that's not the mitzvah. The mitzvah is after it's grown, right? Namely, to reap it, not to plant it. That's not part of the mitzvah. Shari'im matzah charush enu choresh, right? If you found it already plowed the ground when you needed to throw the seeds in, so it's already plowed. You don't have to do it again. Vani osro lecha b'Shabbat, and I forbid you from doing this on Shabbos. Af ketzir shani osro lecha b'shel reshut ani osro lecha. So too, when it comes to reaping, it's only permissible or volitional, I should say, reaping that's prohibited. That's what I've forbidden you. Yatsa katsir haomer shehi mitzvah, shu mitzvah, and that's to exclude the reaping of the harvest of the omer, which is itself a mitzvah. Shafilu matzah katsur mitzvah liktsur. Let's say you got there Friday night and it was already harvested. Do you have to harvest again? Yes. The Torah says uktsartem et kitzira. So it says you have to do the actual cutting, the act of cutting. So that tells you that it must even override Shabbos. Ad Erev, now we're into the drush of Rabbi Yishmael. Ad Erev, Lailahu va'ad bichlal. Ad Erev, so to the night, including the nighttime, right? But the time up to the nighttime as well, that would be forbidden. Kol ha'ochel v'shoteh, now is the end of the drush, now into Rabbi Akiva again, the idea of eating on the 9th. I'm calling the eating on the 9th an act of affliction. And therefore, the more that a person will eat and drink on that day, I will consider that better. When it said you have to afflict yourself the 9th from the evening and through the 10th, Rabbi Akiva says it just means that on the 9th you're supposed to eat, and then the 10th you're not allowed to eat. And by eating on the 9th to a great quantity, so when you get to the 10th, that's like you fast on the 10th, it's like you fasted the 2 days. But no one thinks you're supposed to fast the 2 days. Okay, now we'll go into Tosafot. Oh, sorry.
Question, why, how does this proof single out only eating? What about the other Inuim? Is there, in other words,
Yeah.
is there an
So when we
obligation
learned,
to wear
when
leather?
we learned Masachet Yuma, we learned that the main Inuyim in question, the ones that actually carry an Isser Karet, because of the way the Torah goes on to say, Kol Ochel, you know, is only, those are the main Inuyim. The other Inuyim do not hold the same strength and carry the same level of consequence as do eating and drinking. Therefore, the Inui on 9 is Davka to eat and drink a lot, as opposed to the other malachas, because in the Pshat, it only mentions the eating. And Chazal understand eating and drinking are together in this. They're like on a par with each other. And then the other Inuyim, they don't figure into the Pshat, and therefore the Drush of Rabbi Akiva does not obtain. Also, what would you do? Wear extra leather shoes?
Yeah.
On the 9th, I'm saying.
Okay.
Yeah, so, but good, it's a good question.
Yeah.
Yeah, so again, so in Rechitza and Sicha, like where is it going to begin and end? But no, it was a good question. No, the Inui we're talking about is the eating and drinking. That's how Rabbi Akiva learned it, based on Rabbi Chia Bar Rav Midifti. So, we have to learn a little bit of what's going on in Masachet Moed Katan. The problem is Tosafot takes Moed Katan out of order because it's trying to home in on a particular piece, and then it's going to zoom out and end up doing the whole Gemara. But I'm worried if I just do the Gemara Moed Katan with it's going to take the whole time. We won't actually get to Tosafot. So what we'll do instead is maybe we'll just look at the Gemara here. I'm just trying to weigh measure how to do that. So I turn it over my mind how to teach this, how to do it. Okay, yeah, I gave it as a sheet. There should be a sheet there, double-sided sheet. Tosafot here is going to ask a question within the sheet on our page. He's going to ask a sheet within the sheet of Rabbi Yishmael, where the Gemara had opened with the question after we found out Rabbi Akiva explains where he gets the notion of Tosafet from, that he derived it from Becharju Katzer Tishbot, right? Right? Because it says, it tells you, according to Rabbi Akiva, that Charish and Katzir are the source for the notion of Tosafet for Shemitah. And then it says, well, Rabbi Yishmael, where do you learn it from? If you don't believe it's in that pasuk, and that's when he comes up with the pasukim from Vayikra, from Emor. The problem is, in the Gemara in Masachet Moed Katan, it sounds like Rabbi Yishmael thinks that the derivation of the concept of Tosafet for Shemitah is a halacha l'Moshe Misinai. Now, one of the rules we have about halacha l'Moshe Misinai is it's a halacha l'Moshe Misinai. It's not derived from psukim. It's only what we know from one generation to the next. In our Gemara, he's quoting psukim, isn't he? It says so. And then it explains that the extension of these psukim, or pasuk, it's one pasuk, having to do with Yom Kippur in Vayikra, Chav Gimel, and Parshat Emor, we learn from this that anytime there's something involving a shvut, it'll also be part of being Mosiv Mechol HaKodesh. So Rabbeinu Tam wants to know, wait, in the Gemara in Moed Katan, pretty sure that Rabbi Yishmael said it was a hilchata, means a halacha l'Moshe Misinai. So why in this Gemara is Rabbi Yishmael deriving things from Sukkim? Why didn't he just say, how do I know about Tosafet? Tosafet Shvit specifically? Why? I know it because halacha l'Moshe Misinai. Wouldn't have been an easier answer. We needed derivations about other contexts where we're dealing with Tosafet. So Rabbi Yishmael Mosiv Mechol HaKodesh Minale, that's the basic idea.
But halacha was an impression to the sukkah that halacha Moshe Sinai comes in when there is not a pasuk.
That's exactly the question of Tosafot. Halacha Moshe Sinai comes up when there's no pasuk. So, and Rabbi Yishmael himself thinks there's no pasuk in the Gemara in Moed Katan, which we're about to look into.
Well, it would have been simpler if he had just said it's halacha Moshe Sinai.
That's Tosafot's question.
But then I'm not understanding the question. It would have been easier for him to have said halacha Moshe Sinai, but there are pesukim, and therefore that is not the facile answer.
True. But that will raise the question, when he drew upon this pasuk, what is he intending to do? Once he's already said something's halacha Moshe Sinai in one place, we don't know which one came first, which one came second. Why is he then going to a pasuk? Mimanav shach. Either it's halacha Moshe Sinai, in which case you don't have use for the pasuk, or it's not halacha Moshe Sinai, in which case don't call it that. Just use the psukim.
But is he saying he's using psukim? He's not calling halacha Moshe Sinai.
Not in the Gemara Rosh Hashanah, but as we'll soon see when we open up the Gemara in Moed Katan, sounds like he does think it is halacha Moshe Sinai. And that's the stira. That's the classic. That's what Tosafot. Right. So now, how to learn this Gemara without taking the whole time? Just learn this Gemara. Well, we'll try. We'll try. Okay. So when is Tosafet Shvi? Like, when does it start? So we generally think maybe it's like 30 days before, something like that. But no, we have here in the Gemara, it seems like what it's saying is something to the effect of it's much, much earlier. Meaning, in year 6, as soon as we're already up to the period of time where it's the time for that particular food to be harvested, everything after that is already part of Tosafet Shvit. So when it comes to certain things, it'll be Pesach. Certain things, it will be Shavuot. We didn't even get to Shavuot. So that's on this page. And again, we're grabbing it, in the middle of the middle. So don't catch me in everything here, but 1, 2. I'm on the page that has number 1 with a circle around it on the bottom of the page. I am in the Gemara 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 lines down. Ad matai chorshin b'stei ilan erev shvit. Do you have it there? There's a little superscript aleph in the Vilna Shas, in what they call Rashi script in my Gemara at least. Ad matai chorshin.
Where are you, Rabbi? Are you in Moed Katan?
I'm Moed Katan daf gimel and bet.
Okay.
I decided they got to skip there because if we don't learn that Gemara, I'll say it the other way. If we learn that this Gemara, and it'll take a little while, Tosafot's much smoother to understand what's going on in this Tosafot and certainly the next Tosafot. So we have here this limud, ad matai chorshin b'stei ilan. Until when can we plow in an orchard, an erev shvit? Beit Shammai omrim kol zman sheyafa lepri, ubeit Hillel omrim ad ha'atzeret. That's Shavuot. Yeah. Ukrovin divrei elu liot kedivrei elu. Okay, so the one's opinion seems to be close to the others. Rashi crossed the aisle here on the left hand side. Kol zman sheyafa lepri. The words at the beginning of the line are sheyafa lepri. It's actually in our Gemara highlighted. Kilomar kol zman shechari sheyafa leperot shegadlu b'shishit. Dahainu nami karav la'atzeret. Avol mikan ve'elach lo. Davikim atakin perot shvi'it. So as long as the plowing would be good for the fruits that have grown in the 6th year, that would be okay to still continue plowing. Again, around, you're making furrows around in the orchards that the water gets in, irrigation ditches, whatever it is. So you're plowing that, you're moving it around. That's okay for anything that grew in the 6th year, close to Shavuot. Remember, Shavuot is a Rosh Hashanah, the Perot HaElan. It's Chag HaBikurim. So Beit Shammai, Beit Hillel, right? Beit Shammai thinks it's really, as long as it's good for the pre, meaning the pre of the 6th year, you're allowed to do it. You're fixing the perot that really will be growing in the 7th year, because the harvest of the fruits is taking place at Shavuot time. And the Gemara says, well, the difference between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel is actually very slight. So then the Gemara says, also quoting from Mishnah in Shvit, Vad matay chorshin stay alavan, till when you're allowed to plow in a stay alavan, a white field means grain, because it looks whitish from afar. So erev Shvit, until an erev Shvit, until when? Mishetichla halecha, until the time of the end of the moisture. B'chol zman shebnei adam chorshin lita mikshaot umidlaot. So the people still, they're planting their cucumbers, they're planting their gourds. That'll be okay. So what is that? Mishtichla lecha, Rashi. Shekalin eksham shoshana shishit. Dar ha'ishaite mahani charisha l'zriya. Deshanazu. Av mishtichla halecha, it's not raining anymore. And the yachol achor. The machzik echorish and tzorach shvi'it. The hainu kozman shebnei adam chorshin lita mikshaot. Yeah? In other words, what you're learning from these two Mishnayot is both Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel think that around the time of Shavuot, you can't do plowing anymore in your field if your field is an orchard. And when does it stop raining? Around Pesach time? That's when you have to stop doing the plowing in your field for Asdei Lavan for Tevuah. So that's a long Tosafot Shvit. It starts in the 6th year, already from the previous harvest. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Im Kain, Nitna Torah Shir L'chol Echad Ve'echad Biyado. Yeah. So according to that, you gave everything. Rashi says, this one's going to be doing this time, it's going to be doing that time. You need a standard. So rather, what does the Gemara say? Ella b'stei halavan ara Pesach u'b'stei ilan ara atzeret. Done. You have till Pesach to do Tevuah. The Pesach nidonan ala Tevuah. The Mishnah Rosh Hashanah. We didn't get to it yet, but it'll say, there's four times that the world is going to be judged. But Pesach is on the Tevuah, and on Atzeret is on Perot HaElan, right? Rosh Hashanah, our Rosh Hashanah that we know is we're being judged, and so on and so forth. Yeah, and Bechag Nidon and Alamayim, we're judged with regard to the water of the for the coming year on Sukkot. So we have a standard time. Skip that in bracketed line because I think it's supposed to be erased. Actually, late on Mishnah Deshvit. V'amar B'Shum ben Pazi, Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi Mishum Bar Kapara. They're the following limud. Rabban Gamliel Beit Yino Nimnu Al Shnei Prakim Halal Ubitlum. Rabban Gamliel and his Bezdin, they got together. They canceled Tosafot Shvit starting in Pesach. They canceled Tosafot Shvit starting at Atzeret. This is astounding. Amar Le Rabbi Zel Rabbi Abau. The Amisa Rabbi Abba, being the Rabbi Shuban Levi, is the name of Bar Kapar, right? So this is like, what? How could this be? Amar Rabbi Zil Rabbi Abba, Amila Reish Lakish Rabbi Yochanan. Someone said it to someone else, in really incredulous. Rabbi Gamliel, Beit Yino, Heichi Matzum Bevatli Takanta the Beit. Someone Beit Hillel. Rabbi Gamliel is canceling things that a previous generation signed, sealed, delivered. Impossible. V'hatznan ein Beitin Yachol Levatal Divrei Beitin Chaver Elim Kain Gadol Mimenu B'Chacham of a Minyan. It's impossible. You'd have to be a greater B'Chacham means in wisdom and in number, i.e., you have to be of a higher stature. And Gamliel is amazing, but he's not Beit Shammai Beit Hillel. Ish domain kesha achada. Just for I don't know if it was actually literally an hour, but for some period of time, Rabbi Bao was, imagine with his mouth, agape. He's waiting. Amar le imor kach hitnu b'neim koloratz levato yavli v'yivatel didhu. It must be that takes a crack at it to try and tighten it up. It must be that Beit Shammai Beit Hillel really, when they made this Takan originally, they said anyone who wants to come and cancel it could go ahead and cancel it. So the Gemara says, what? What do you mean? So the Gemara answers another possible, right? Like really? Where does it say that? Right? So Didhui, they made up the Takana. The Gemara says Didhui, they made up the Takana themselves, Beit Shammai Beit Hillel. Halach l'Moshe Misinai. The notion of having Tosafot is halach l'Moshe Misinai. How do we know it's halach l'Moshe Misinai? And this will be very familiar to all of us who learned Sukkah together, because we did this actually in Masechet Sukkah. Rabbi Amar Rabbi Asi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Techunya Ish Bikat Beit Churtan. All right, here's the limud. Aser Netiot, Arava, B'Nisuch Hamayim, halach l'Moshe Misinai. 3 things that are all halach l'Moshe Misinai. Aser Netiot, having to do with Shvi'it. Arava, the mitzvah of Arava in the Mikdash. We talked about it, the long Aravot, yeah. And Nisuch Hamayim is the pouring of the water. Also, Masachet Sukkah, the pouring of the water onto the Mizbeach on Sukkot. All those three things, Allah Moshe Misinai. What's Eser Netiyot? So Eser Netiyot means, and if you look at Rashi, he'll tell you right here. Hamafuzar betoch Beit Sa'ah shu nun al nun. You have a certain area called the Beit Sa'ah, which is 50 amma by 50 amma. So chorshin kol asada shela b'shvilan be'erev shvi'it ad Rosh Hashanah. There's a special halacha that if you have 10 plantings, 10 saplings, young trees, in other words, not totally taken root, you planted them at some point during the 6th year, and now you're getting closer to the year of Shemitah. So there's a special heter halacha Moshe Misinai. You can plow again to make irrigation ditches, etc., around them, so that the water will get there until Rosh Hashanah. Since they are yaladot, like a yalda, yaladot, they're girls, they're young. So there'll be a large loss, financial loss. I mean, Rashi, by the way, and I've given Amid Bet. Lekach chorshin ad Rosh Hashanah. We let you do it until Rosh Hashanah. Aval zikena, an old tree, not elderly, but old. That means it's already strong. It has its roots in there. The roots are developed enough that it's going to get water on its own, presumably. Ein chorshin ad Rosh Hashanah, ama, delach Moshe Misinai hein. You learn delach Moshe Misinai. Arava, la'akiv mizbeach, as we discussed. Nisach hamayim, self-explanatory. In other words, Gemara cannot understand, how did Rabban Gamliel cancel something that Beit Shammai Beit Hillel put in place and that they set a time for? So the answer, the first a crack at it, which is swing and a miss, is, well, they basically established it and said, whoever wants to come cancel can cancel it. You want to recalls the second time. That's not going to work, because actually it's Halacha Moshe Misinai. You see there's a Halacha Moshe Misinai that the younger trees, you could still be Choresh until Rosh Hashanah, and older trees you can't be, which tells you what? The notion of Tosafot clearly is at least Allah Moshe Misinai, because this exception is Allah Moshe Misinai. So Allah Moshe Misinai cannot be, which comes from Har Sinai, from Moshe Rabbeinu on Har Sinai. It cannot be that there was no institution of Tosafot and Beit Shammai Beit Hillel made it up. Oh, but there's Allah Moshe Misinai, that the thing that Beit Shammai Beit Hillel made up in sometime in the 1st century of the Common Era is actually has Allah Moshe Misinai to get you out of it? Yefshar. You understand the logical problem? It's like, how did Rabban Gamliel have the audacity to try to cancel out something that Beit Shammai Beit Hillel did? And don't try to tell me that Beit Shammai Beit Hillel made some kind of takana. Of course not. It's impossible. If it was possible, then there couldn't be halacha Moshe Misinai about it, because that means that at its root, it's from Har Sinai. So the Gemara comes up with the following idea. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Ki Gemira Hilchata, Shloshim Yom Lifnei Rosh Hashanah. What is the halacha Moshe Misinai that's being waived in the halacha Moshe Misinai called Eser Netiyot, about up to 10 trees in a space, in an area of 50 amma by 50 amma called the Beit Sa'ah, that you could do up until Rosh Hashanah? That original halacha is Shloshim Yom before Rosh Hashanah. Ve'atu hane takun mipesach u'miatzeret. Ve'atnu b'didei kol harotz levatel yavol v'yavatel. Yeah. So then along came Rabban Gamliel, and Rabban Gamliel said, what I'm canceling is what Beit Shammai Beit Hillel did make up. What did they make up? They came up with the idea of Tosafot starting either at Pesach and Atzeret, not or. Pesach and Atzeret. Pesach for this day 11, and Atzeret for Perot HaIlan. And when they made it, I'm telling you, they said, Kol haratz levatel yavol v'yavatel. Anyone who wants to make the cancel out what we did is allowed to. And therefore, it's not subject to Elim Kain Gadol, Ein Beitin Yachol Levatel Divrei Beitin Chaver Elim Kain Gadol Mimanu B'Chacham of a Minyan. It doesn't apply here. How come? Because they basically said, and if you look at the last Rashi on the page, or Va'atu, Rashi Va'atu, means that along they came to Takana Didu. They're the ones who made the Takana Didu. Chiku Ara Pesach V'Ara Atzeret. V'chol harotz levatel yavol v'yavatel for Rabban Gamliel debatel lo bitel ela me Pesach v'Atzeret ad shloshim yom lifnei Rosh Hashanah. But what could Rabban Gamliel not cancel? 30 days before Rosh Hashanah, because that's the halacha Moshe Misinai. Really, follow? We came back from the brink because it doesn't make sense. How could he have canceled Tosafot? It obviously has roots in halacha Moshe Misinai because there's an exception. Can't be an exception if there isn't a rule. there must have been a rule that was Halacha Moshe Messina. What's that? 30 days. And that's actually the halacha. 30 days before the onset of Shemitah, that's when we get to Tosafot Shvi'it. That's when you're not allowed to do the Charisha, except for the Eser Natiyot, up to 10 saplings in a 50 by 50 amma area, that you can do the Charisha, make the irrigation ditches. Are you with me? This was all the prelude to the part that we already all know and love, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines up from the bottom on Daf Gimel Amud Bet, starting beginning of the line. Vahane Hilchataninu. Sorry, this whole thing is Halacha Moshe Misinai. Karai Ninhu. These are psukim. Ditnan. After all, didn't we learn? Or it truly be the Tanya. What's that? Becharish v'katzir tishbot. Rabbi Akiva Omer ein tzarich lomar charish v'katzir shel shvit. Shari kvar nemer sad chalotis vel chamer chalotis more. I don't have to translate this, do I? We just learned this tonight. It's on the top of page 9a in Rosh Hashanah, right? Elachari shel shvit shel erev shvit shenichnas next page l'shvit. Uktzir shel shvit sheyatza l'motzei shvit. Rabbi Yishmael Omer macharish reshut af katzir reshut. Yatza katzir haomer shehi mitzvah. Is the whole thing Halacha Moshe Sinai? The whole thing's really from Psukim. Look, here's the pasuk. B'charish v'katzir tishbot. Look what Rabbi Akiva darshaned, and look how Rabbi Yishmael says, "Oh, the charish is a reshut and the katzir is a reshut, and therefore it's talking about regular Shabbos, except for what's the exception? The reaping of the harvest of the Omer, which is a mitzvah." So Ela Amar Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak says, "Ki gemiri hilchata lemishrei yalda." Kroi lemesar zikena. So Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak says, when we learned the Halacha Moshe Misinai, the Halacha Moshe Misinai was just to teach us that it's permissible to still do Charisha on Erev Shvi'it for saplings. The pasuk that we learned, B'charish v'katzir tishbot, that is to be Mesar, the Zakena, to tell us that it's Aser when it's Zakena, it's to show the distinction. Aser Natil doesn't mean any 10 trees, it means young versus old. The cave in the Hilchata the Mishrei Yalda, Lava Mela Zakena Asira. So the fact that the Halacha Moshe Sinai is to teach us that the Yalda is the one that's permissible, wouldn't it be obvious that a Zakena, an older tree, would automatically be prohibited in the law of Tosafot Shvit? What do you need a pasuk for? So Ella says the Gemara, Hilchata l'Rabbi Yishmael, Kiroi l'Rabbi Akiva. Since Rabbi Akiva learns from Becharish v'Katzir Tishbot Tosafot Shvit, we just learned that on page 9a in Rosh Hashanah. So check the box. He must hold that it is derived from a pasuk, and the Tosafot idea, and the Halacha Moshe Sinai is only for the exception of the Yalda, meaning the young saplings. Rabbi Yishmael does not learn from that pasuk. The pasuk Becharish v'Katzir Tishbot, he thinks it's actually about the Shabbos that comes around every week. So where does Rabbi Yishmael learn the idea of Tosafot Shvi'it? He learns it as a derivative from the Halacha Moshe Sinai about Eser Natiyot. There's no mention here about the Psukim from Parshat Emor, about Tosafot Shabbat, Yom Kippurim, Tosafot Shabbat, Tosafot Yom Tov, and also anywhere that it says Shvut, it should also be grandfathered in that it's also subject to Tosafot. In this Gemara, if all we had was Moed Katan, you'd walk away, close the door, saying, "Oh, okay, straighten my head." For Rabbi Akiva, there's a derivation from the pasuk. The derivation from the pasuk is to tell us that there is for Rabbi Yishmael, for Rabbi Akiva, the derivation is from the pasuk, and we learn it from the pasuk. And the Halacha Moshe Sinai is to tell us there's an exception on that pasuk. For Rabbi Yishmael, the pasuk does not teach us anything about Shvi'it. The pasuk is just about Shabbos, not about Shemitah. And therefore, the way we learn about the concept of Tosafot Shvi'it is because of the Halacha Moshe Sinai, we infer that that exceptional case teaches us that there's a rule hiding behind it, which is also Halacha Moshe Sinai. That's the implication. So, Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Yochanan says, Rabbi Gamliel ubeitino mido oraita batilahu. Yeah, I mean, this is just astounding. How could it be if we now have like a source in the Torah, whether Halacha Moshe Sinai or from Psukim? How could Rabbi Gamliel have tried to cancel this out. Like, how could it be? Right? Where am I? Rabbi Yochanan, Amar, Rabbi Gamliel, Ve'ubeitino mido oraita batilahu. How could he have canceled it out? My timer, Gamar Shabbat mishabbat Breshit. Malahalan he asur lefanel acharea mutarin. He asur lefanel acharea mutarin. Afkan he asur lefanel acharea mutarin. I mean, here again, astounding. But the Gemara goes on to say it. Rabbi Yochanan says that Rabbi Gamliel and his Beit Din canceled a Tosafot Shvi'it Mida Oraita. And the Gemara says, well, how could he do that? He says, oh, he learned it from the regular Shabbos. Since the regular Shabbos, the weekday Shabbos itself is Asr, but the moments before, the moments after Min HaTorah are really permissible. It doesn't say that they're Asr directly in the Torah. So therefore, it's true also for Shemitah. Makifla Rav Ashi. Yeah. Rav Ashi just attacks. I don't know what the word is. He attacks this idea, this possibility. Rabbi Gamliel canceled Shemitah de Oraita. So he says, Man da'amar hilchata atik zera shava. Akra hilchata, yeah. Umanda amar kra atya gzera shava akra kra. This whole thing is not adding up. It's not adding up. How could you say that Rabbi Gamliel, there's either a derivation from a pasuk, not a derivation from a pasuk? He's destroying an entire institution. He thinks it's not the oraita. How could Rabbi Gamliel not think Tosafot is the oraita? Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Yishmael, they all hold it's the oraita. The question is what the source is. El amar of Ashi, Rabbi Gamliel, Beitino Savri La, Rabbi Yishmael. The Amri Hilchata Gemiri La, V'chi Gemiri Hilchata Bizman Shebeit Hamikdash Kayam, Dumya Denisuch Hamayim, Al Bizman She'en Beit Hamikdash Kayam Lo. Here everything gets clarified. I'll say it outside. Rav Ashi clarifies that Rabbi Gamliel doesn't cancel Tosafot Shvi'it, but he thinks it does not apply if there's no Beit Hamikdash. The limud of Allah Moshe Sinai here came as a package. Eser Netiot was right next to the mitzvah of Arava, was right next to the mitzvah of Nisuch Hamayim. The latter two are based where? In the Mikdash. Why is this limud of the three of them together? Rabbi Gamliel has Beit Din reasoned to tell us that they're all connected to each other. If we don't have Nisuch Hamayim or Arava because there's no Beit HaMikdash, then we don't have Tosafot Shvi'it either because there's no Beit HaMikdash. What emerges from this Gemara is the following. According to, in this Gemara, Rabbi Akiva thinks you could derive the notion of Tosafot from Sukkim. And there's halach, everyone agrees with halach Moshe Sinai, and that is that the Yalda goes all, there's no Tosafot applied to her or to them. In the case of Rabbi Yishmael, it's halach Moshe Sinai. That tells you this detail, but the truth is that detail, which is about the Eser Netiot, is in order to tell you to infer this halach Moshe Sinai about Tosafot Shvi'it altogether, not derived from Sukkim at all. In the third case, Rabbi Gamliel says, look, there is notion of Tosafot Shvi'it. I essentially agree with Rabbi Yishmael. It's not derived from Sukkim. What I think, though, is that without a Beit HaMikdash, the fact that halacha Moshe Sinai, that detail of Eser Netiot, the exemption, is grouped with two other things that are in the Mikdash, and those two things obviously aren't happening when there's no Beit HaMikdash, so too there's no Tosafot Shvi'it, there's no Beit HaMikdash. We just learned the underpinning of two Tosfotim that we're going to see inside. And that's Rabbeinu Tam's question on Daf Tet Amud Aleph. Rabbeinu Tam doesn't understand. Why did the Gemara here give us lines for Rabbi Yishmael? It asked the question, actually, Rabbi Yishmael, Mosim Mechol HaKodesh, Minale. What do you mean Minale? The answer is, he got it from Halach Moshe Sinai. It's on Daf Daled. White Katan. Yeah. Taylor Rabbeinu Tam, Ha'amrin Parakam the Moed Katan. I'm now in Argamar, yeah? It says there, and if you look in the Haggadah Bach, it points out, the Eser Netiot Halach Moshe Sinai, the Hilchatel Rabbi Yishmael Karoy Rabbi Akiva, right? The Kevan, the Hilchatel Rabbi Yishmael. Oh, sorry. So you have to skip. Kevan the Hilchatel Lemishre Yalda Memela Zakena Asura, right? And the whole idea was that how did Rabbi Yishmael come up with that idea? Right? Yeah, the idea, because there's an Eser Netiot, which is a heter, to not have to be involved in Tosafot Shvi'it for the younger saplings that were just planted. Yeah? Okay. V'tiretz Rabbeinu Tam, The Hacham Abayla Tosafet shel Achar Shvit. All right, Manale. The Rabbeinu Tam's answer is the reason why we needed this derivation in the Psukim is because, according to Rabbi Yishmael, that's not part of the Halach L'Moshe Sinai. That part is derived from Psukim, and we're learning the notion of Tosafet on the way out of something, Shabbos, Yom Kippur, Shabbos, Yom Tov, and also of Shemitah from these Psukim.
Where is the Tosafot at the end of it?
We don't finish with sunset. We extend beyond sunset at Tzedek Kochavim.
Say,
Yeah, and a little bit more, because really you could start arguing maybe after, once you get farther and farther, closer to Tzedek Kochavim. No, we took a more Machmer Shita. Make sure that it's over. It's Tosafet. So Rabbeinu Tam's quick answer is the Hacham Ebayle, but Tosafet shel Achar Shvi'it Manole. That's what he counted it. Right? He needed to account for it here in our Gemara. He wasn't talking about the way in. That was Halach L'Moshe Sinai. It's the way out that he didn't have. Uv'chinam dachak dekeven d'shvit gufa mehalacha le'afinan mina Shabbat v'Yom Kippurim v'Yom Tov ve'in danin kal v'chomer mehalacha. And the truth is, it's a little bit of a forced question altogether, because the very fact that we get the notion of Shvi'it from Halach L'Moshe Sinai, we have a principle that if we have Halach L'Moshe Sinai, it's fixed. We don't learn Kal V'chomer from Halach L'Moshe Sinai. In other words, if Rabbi Yishmael believes, which he seems to believe, that Tosafet Shvi'it is itself really a Halacha L'Moshe Sinai, you couldn't have extrapolated from there and make a bridge over to Tosafet Yom Kippurim, Tosafet Shabbat, Tosafet Yom Tov. That would have to be derived elsewhere. In other words, say Tosafot, I asked this question and I fetched it out that it's about what's going on at the end of Shvit, because we were trying to understand why is Rabbi Yishmael making recourse to Psukim. But the real answer is, he needed to make recourse to Psukim, not for Tosafet Shvit, but for Tosafet Shabbat, Yom Tov, Yom Kippurim, which he could not have derived from a Halach L'Moshe Sinai about Shemitah, because we maintain that a Halach L'Moshe Sinai is fixed. You're not done a Kal V'chomer from a halacha, meaning from a halacha Moshe Sinai. The ain danin Kal V'chomer halacha. V'hashta l'Rabbi Yishmael itzrich kra mishum Shabbat v'Yom Tov, and therefore Rabbi Yishmael did need psukim for what? For Tosafet Shabbat, for Tosafet Yom Tov, Tosafet Yom Kippurim. V'itzrich hilchata. He needed the halacha Moshe Sinai lemishrei yalda in order to permit the yalda, the younger saplings, to be able to do the charisha up until Shemitah. V'ha delo mishane hachi. The fact that it did not teach all of this b'moed Katan, right? Didn't say in Moed Katan. We didn't get this whole thing of Daf Gimel Amud Bet. Rabbi Akiva the Itzrich Kra l'lamed al Shabbat v'Yom Tov v'Kippurim. And the fact that here the fact that it didn't teach this in Moed Katan for Rabbi Akiva, we needed a pasuk to learn about Shabbos and Yom Tov and Yom Kippur mishum demahalacha lo yalfina, because we weren't going to learn it from a halacha l'Moshe Sinai. You can't derive these concepts. The inkain lahavle lemichtav kroi gabe shvi'it. The only reason why there was a quotation about Shemitah altogether was in order to use it for its derivative qualities, i.e., to learn about Shabbos, Yom Tov, and Yom Kippurim from it. Mazel Tov Chassan. Nice to see you here. Finishing in 2 minutes, so it was at the end of it. Right? So we wouldn't be able to learn these concepts from Allah Moshe Sinai, and it obtains also for Rabbi Akiva. Because we have a little bit of a question here. Where does Rabbi Akiva learn the notion of Tosafet for Shabbos and Yom Tov and Yom Kippurim, that you need Tosafet? Doesn't seem to say here, right? Doesn't seem to say. So, and the point here is that we didn't learn all this in Moed Katan, because when it was mentioning Rabbi Akiva, so with in Rabbi Akiva's world, so he was learning he had the pasuk. The pasuk itself was teaching us about Tosafet in terms of Shvi'it, but since it's a pasuk, you could learn from it to other things. Allah Moshe Sinai. So it turns out that according to Rabbi Akiva, the notion of Mosim Mechodesh Mechol Ala Kodesh, the headquarters is Shemitah, and everything is learned from Shemitah. For Rabbi Yishmael, Shemitah is learned as Halacha Moshe Sinai, a Tosafot Shvid at the beginning of Shvid. Shabbos, Yom Tov, Yom Kippurim derived from Psukim, and Tosafot Shvi'it on the way out also derived from Psukim. That's what emerges based on what Tosafot here explain. Okay, on the phone, we're good. Everyone, you understand what's going on? Okay. Kol makom shenamar shvut. Next Tosafot. Anywhere that says shvut, va'atel rabot shvit. Right. That was the point there of where it said kol makom. Where is it? Where am I? In the Gemara. For Rabbi Yishmael, it said, right? It said, Kol makom shish bo shvut, mosifim mechol hakodesh. So Tosafot just throw in, I said this already outside, and it's coming in order to add in shvi'it, which when we learned it originally, we thought was Tosafot shvi'it altogether. When we learned the Gemara Moed Katan, we learned it's Tosafot shvi'it, b'yotze b'shvi'it, lashminit. Things that grew in the 7th year, going into the 8th year. If I was Superman, I don't think I'd do the next Tosafot in 4 minutes. So I guess we have our work cut out for us on the second day of Shavuot, which is the next time we'll learn. Since next week, it's on the schedule. It's published tomorrow. I think it's 6:30 to 7:15. I think that's the time. And then I'm going to do another 2 right after that till Mincha. So it'll be like a double header for me. But the next Tosafot was way more exciting than the one we even did. So. I mean, you can't get more riveting than that. That's what I think. But okay, Ad Con for tonight. We did Gemara Moed Katan. We did Tosafot. Thanks for being here. Have I should say, Moedim L'Simcha V'Legula Shlema. Should be zochem to many great simchas and to continue to hear. We hope to hear good news. B'Serot Tavot, Yeshuot V'Nechamot B'Karot.